I'd like to call the Finance and Audit Selection Committee meeting to order. The first action is to approve the Finance and Audit Selection Committee minutes from June 21st for the auditor's presentation. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
And with a,
I'm sorry, let me clarify.
yes,
This is for the finance committee.
it's okay. That would have been good. I was going to accept it, but go ahead.
So move.
Okay, so Chief Milliken made the motion. Do I have a second? Second. With a motion and a second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, with them approved. Now to approve the Finance and Audit Committee Selection Committee's minutes from June 21st.
So move.
I have a approve and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. With that, I call for the meeting to be adjourned.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll call our meeting to order, Juvenile Welfare Board meeting, and I will ask Mike McCurrick to lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first order of business today is to ask you for a motion to accept our consent agenda items.
So move.
Thank you, Mr. McCurrick. A second?
Second.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Butler. All approved?
Aye.
That motion carries. We're moving on to action items. Number 3 on your agenda, action item A, is to approve the proposed FY22 millage rate and preliminary FY22 budget. Laura Brock.
Good morning. We're here today to discuss the changes that were made to the proposed budget that was provided at the last board meeting. We did receive on July 1st the updated certified taxable values from the county, from the property appraiser's office, which reflected a little higher number in the property taxes than we had anticipated. So based on the changes which were made in the budget, it provided an increase of about $5.5 million in property taxes that are proposed to be levied. To remind you that we did budget for a 97% collection as opposed to 95% as we did a year ago. And due to the 97% collection, the impact on our proposed budget will actually be $6.9 million based on what we had previously proposed at a previous meeting. The other items have not been changed. We're tweaking the program expenses as we go along, but there's been no changes relative to the program COLAs, the non-recurring and funded non-operating capital RFA. We've kept that budget assumption the same with the future programming and the contingencies. As far as the administrative expenses, that has remained the same as well. The cost of living adjustment that had been provided was 3%. To remind you again that we have hired Evergreen Solutions as a consultant to do an HR human resources analysis of our compensation study, which is required to be done every 3 years. And then in line with the strategic plan, we are continuing to look at the staffing needs within the organization to be able to implement all the future programs. Linda's going to speak to that a little bit after I finish this section. We are required to provide by August 3rd to the property appraiser's office the certified values and the proposed millage and the proposed budget. So staff is recommending that the board adopt a proposed millage rate of 0.8981, which would yield an $85 million ad valorem revenues. And the preliminary budget right now has been projected at $127,564,795. Any questions?
Was that the current millage rate from last year?
Yes, it was. That's correct. Attached to the memo that you've got is the detail of the budget, and as I mentioned at the last board meeting, it's a little different format that you've had in the past. It lists all the programs now as opposed to identifying it by the 4 strategic areas now that we've got the new strategic plan in place. You also have the detail budget, which we've added on the right-hand column. There's a bunch of columns that identify which strategic plan or focus area it affects, and we've gone through that to identify the different overlaps, because we had several programs that we found when we tried to carve out the 0 to 3s, we felt like they were affecting more than one area. So you'll be able to see that. We've also provided, again, a summary in alphabetical order, so if you wanted to look up a particular agency to see how much their funding was, you will see that as well. Followed by that, you've got the administrative expenses, the non-administrative expenses, and then the forecast. So the forecast has been updated for the revenue numbers that I've just mentioned, and so you can see now that we're projecting total resources, which would include the fund balance carried forward from the previous year of $127,564. Of course, we have a balanced budget, so we carry forward our resources from the prior year that we are estimating. And then you can see the expenses, again, between future programming at $2.5 million. We spoke about at the last meeting in fiscal '23 that we're estimating about $6.75 million in future programming, so we can get started in fiscal '22 to ramp that up and get the positions and perhaps send out an unsolicited RFA, or we've got a lot of things that we're thinking about in that area that would help us to be able to anticipate spending those dollars in fiscal '23. In that respect, if you continue to move forward for the fiscal year '25, that would leave us with a 36% unassigned fund balance of expenditures. We've been looking at the fund balance amounts, and in the past, the policy here is to have a 2-month reserve for your cash flow requirements, and then another 1-month reserve, which would give you 3 months, so to speak. We're thinking of taking a look at that to determine if maybe we want to consider a 2-month cash flow reserve and maybe a higher dollar amount or percentage for the other reserves. And then that way we'd be able to tuck that aside and then really look at the unfunded, unassigned balance to see how we're spending it, how we're not spending it, and if we wanted to consider a change in the millage rate going forward. So that would be another discussion that we'll have going forward. I'd be glad to answer any questions before I turn it over to Linda.
I do have a question to follow up on Mr. Bartlett's question about the millage rate. Just for the purposes of our newer board members, how long has this millage rate been in existence for us?
Since 2013.
That's what I thought. So since 2013, we've had this millage rate.
Correct.
And the last couple of meetings, we've said we'll entertain some discussion for next year based on our spending this year.
I mean, just, again, I'm the new guy in the block here, I guess. Sarah and I both are new here. So some of this procedure we haven't been through, but it seems to me that when we have a 6.64% increase in our revenue based on the increased property taxes, which don't appear to be going anywhere down as far as valuations are based on what my analysis of the market is so far, is it would be prudent for us to at least maintain our level of spending so we can move in the direction of dropping the millage rate as long as the values of the property increase. It just, to me, you know, maybe I'm wrong on this analysis, but just because you make more doesn't mean you have to necessarily spend more. The budget is a significant amount of infusion of capital into the community, and that's what it was intended for, and it certainly does that. But at some point in time, I think you might have to assess that it might be fair to the taxpayers because of the increased property values to say, you know, drop. And this year's a huge extra increase in revenue. We're talking millions and millions of dollars.
I'm going to go ahead and refer to Mr. McCurrick and then over to Beth Helm.
Yeah, I'm not in disagreement. The only caveat to what Mr. Bartlett I would say is that we have a new strategic plan that we have been focusing on that has different programs in it, some of which are expected to need to be expanded, and to grow. And I believe that's part of the reason why in our undertaking over the last year was to really consider holding off making any changes to this and waiting till next year to really assess where are we and what additional funds we need. The staff and leadership have been talking about some increased staffing that's going to be required. We've added new positions specifically for 0 to 3 that we have to let settle in and begin to really address. We have some proposals out there to help other organizations, other people outside of who are part of the current grouping within JWB. So there are opportunities and places for these funds to be used now, and I think it's an appropriate time to do that since we're coming off of COVID and off a slow period where we can really help identify areas of real need and concern, some of which we may have taken our eye off of in the past. Now we can put our eye back on them. Let it go through this coming year, this year, and then look very, very closely at it for next year's budget, because it would, if we went more than another year, I believe it would be unacceptable to the taxpayers if we're not spending it. But if we're spending it in the right direction and adding value, then it would make more sense to do just that. So that's, I think, part of our reasoning over the last few years not to make those changes, to kind of hold it steady to see where we are. But we are at that point where we need to really address it heavily for next year's budget timeframe.
Beth? Right, and I thank you, Mr. McCurrick. We absolutely have had these conversations for the last couple of months at this table, that it is time to consider it, but the time is not now with the derailment of our strategic plan this year around COVID and having to redirect. And what we've learned is that the procurement of things that we've actually wanted to spend money on this year has been slowed, not only because of COVID, but because not enough staffing with our new strategic initiatives. So again, I think we're all in absolute agreement that it's a matter of time, whether this year or next year, and the consensus of the board seems to be just wait one more year, put ourselves squarely back at the strategic plan implementation, and then start discussing it the middle of next year.
You spend more and incorporate it in your budget, then next year you need that, you've got to feed off that money too, and then there is no looking backwards, and that's just my concern. And again, I want to make it clear, with a $127 million budget, I mean, there certainly is a lot of money to do the things that need to be done for the community of Pinellas County, period. But I think at some point in time, we in all fairness to the taxpayers, we might want to pull the reins back on the increase and just maintain a level where we're at, that we can safely and economically manage and still provide the necessary services to the community. So that's my point, and I'm done. Thank you.
Turn it over to Linda to talk about the staffing.
Well, speaking of the strategic plan, good morning, everyone. Since your approval of the strategic plan in October, staff have been busy at work to get it implemented. We are using new technology tools to get the plan on a shared site so all staff can see it, and managers are now able to do quarterly updates in a fairly straightforward fashion so we can keep track of our progress fairly easily. Beth created the position of the Chief Evaluation and Innovation Officer to oversee our evaluation unit, as well as lead our new strategic result area for 0 to 3 early childhood development. And we are delighted to have Dr. Barbara Morrison-Rodriguez with her evaluation expertise serving in this role. And our executive and management staff have looked at all the tasks within the strategic plan, our available budget, and our realistic ability to execute the plan. And we asked 3 questions as we were going through this process. Are we doing something now that is not mission critical? Can our processes be streamlined, yet maintain our high standards of compliance? And do we have the staff we need to continue to move at the pace necessary to get the work accomplished? So for the first question, is there something we're doing that's not mission critical? You heard last month at our meeting that we evaluated our COA accreditation status and determined that the hours necessary to get reaccredited really on the staff side could be diverted towards implementing the strategic plan. And so we made the decision to no longer pursue COA accreditation because it was not mission critical. We've already begun to look at our processes for streamlining and, for example, our procurement card review and approval process, our internal contract review and approval process, and some innovative things like using a letter of intent potentially to streamline our procurement process. When we get to the third question, do we have the staff necessary to do what we need to do? It's a little bit yes and no. You know, do we have the skill sets necessary to fulfill some of our new requirements? Well, in the area of IT and performance evaluation, we did determine that we have some staff who could, with some additional training, be able to bridge the gap between IT and evaluation. Over the years, JWB's sophistication with data has increased greatly, from the data we collect, how we store it, where we store it, who can get to it, who has access, who has rights, and who can analyze and report out on it. And it's keeping IT very busy and causing a little bit of a bottleneck on the evaluation side because they have to wait for IT to pull the data. So we've got two staff who are really interested in getting this additional training. They're in the process. They should finish up early next year, and it's really going to help the evaluation unit be more timely in their evaluation and reporting out. But in other areas, we don't have skill set. We don't have people. For example, as Mr. McCurrick just mentioned, we've got the new 0 to 3 early childhood development area, and Barbara's leading the vision and she's leading the evaluation unit, but once we have programs that are ready to implement, we don't have anybody. There's not a position yet for somebody to help implement those programs. So we definitely see a need there. In the area of finance and administration, you know, the backbone that supports a lot of this work, there's definitely some bottlenecks. Every time we do a procurement, which we're going to need to do for respite, for home visiting, for early childhood development, it requires additional work in the area of procurements, contract management, finance, for monitoring and reporting, and so on. In addition, we have been doing a lot more one-off projects in the finance area, you know, that fits into the other duties as assigned, part of the job description, to do an analysis of, well, if we did this, what would it cost? Or could we make this work if we do it that way? But every time you ask somebody to do one of those projects, which is becoming kind of a continual thing, it slows down their regular work that they have to get done. So finance is evaluating the need for additional support in the budget and financial analysis area. And then in the area of HR, just like it is a seller's market in real estate, the employee, not the employer, holds the cards in the labor market. Talented employees are being scooped up just like houses. There's a shortage of employees across the board, across the nation, and the talented people are getting those jobs quickly. So we realized we really need to ramp up the speed with which we do our recruitment so that we don't miss out on highly talented people. In addition, HR managers across the country are bracing themselves for an increase of employee departures. National surveys indicate that 60% of employees are looking for a career move right now. So as much as we hate to admit it, we might lose some of our talented staff and have vacancies that need to be filled. So we need to be prepared for that probable outcome. So as you can see, we have given this whole area substantial thought, and we've come to the determination that we think we need 6 FTEs to be able to move forward with the implementation of our 5-year strategic plan. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Just over what period of time do you expect that we'll fill those roles? And what's the priority of filling those roles?
Immediately?
That's all 6? All 6 today?
Probably HR first,
Okay.
to help us get the other 5.
And the second question is on the procurement side, how much of that is regulatory versus just additional issues that have to be managed in the procurement?
Well, it's both, because there's a mandated timeline with evaluation, and each time we do one, we have a staff evaluation team, so it's not just the procurement staff, it's staff from every department that serve on that team, and depending on how large the solicitation is and how many proposals come in, it can be certainly a heavy lift.
Okay, so but if I understand it correctly, it's more on a regulatory side that creates this bottleneck that we then have to follow and satisfy by adding more staff or bringing people on to do this. Is that?
Yeah, I would just say if I were in my last position, where I was CEO of a nonprofit, the board could get together, I could make a recommendation and say, we've had this longstanding relationship with so-and-so, they do good work, they're ready to do that work, and within a month or two, we could approve that contract. In our environment, we have to start with defining the work itself to a pretty detailed degree, and put together all the requirements before we do anything else. And then every step of the way, or virtually every step of the way, includes public notice and all those kinds of processes. And we need to identify a group of people up front across the organization. As Linda said, it's really not just procurement people, although they tend to lead the effort, but it's people out of our evaluation effort department. It's people out of our program areas who are content experts, who then have to get together to read voluminous proposals. Every part of that has to be in the sunshine. So I would say a significant part of it is because we're in the sunshine and because we are subject to governmental procurement. Governmental procurement is a much more timely or time-consuming activity than it would be in the private sector or the nonprofit sector.
And we just had an example of that by what we just went through with the audit selection process. Correct? I mean, that's, in outside other environments, we would have made a very quick selection and moved on. But because of the regulatory issues we have to deal with, we had to go through this process that took time, and a lot of time from the staff
I think
to
it
do
was
that.
6 months start to finish? 6 months start to finish for the audit selection with
Right, we were talking about it back in November.
November.
December.
And I do know that the number of meetings and scheduling and public postings and, good point.
Right.
That-
And so, I mean, these are things that we need to consider as we were talking about the broader question on needs of staff and financial impacts and the like. In my business, I would handle it a lot differently. But unfortunately, because of the regulatory issues that we have to deal with and the requirements, governmental requirements we have to follow unless we can change them, that just adds more to the process, and it costs more. Let's just be honest, it costs more, and that's unfortunate for the taxpayer, but that's where we are unless we can make some changes.
Further discussion on this item? I'll call for a motion, please.
So move.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Action item 3B, to award and approve the contract for audit services request for proposals. Laura, back to you.
Thank you. So we are, again, talking about the audit RFP that was sent out and utilization of the new Auditor Selection Committee process, which was required by Florida statutes. So we are here today to just discuss that the RFP was submitted back in March. We were looking for a firm that we would be able to engage for a 3-year contract plus 2 one-year renewals, so a 5-year agreement, which then we would be required to go out for bid again after that 5-year period. We received 5 proposals, and the Auditor Selection Committee narrowed that down to 3. So we had the 3 firms come in for the presentations. which they did at the June 21st meeting. Then the Finance Auditor Selection Committee did discuss those and rank those presentations, which was combined with their rankings from the previous section. And so the three firms that were considered were Cherry Beckert with a total score of 122.75. Purvis Gray and Company had a score of 110, and Malden and Jenkins had a score of 110 as well. The responsibility is a little different with this RFP because the board is the one who must engage the firm as opposed to management. So the board would be making the decision today as who they would like to approve for that contract. And then the final engagement letter would be signed by Chair Ralston. And all three of those engagement letters have been included in the packet that you received, just to be prepared for whichever firm would have been selected. So I'll turn it back over to the chair for discussion.
Any discussion on this item, Mr. McCurrick?
It was clear to me, based on the scoring that you just heard, who should be selected. And so I would just recommend that we move forward with our current auditors.
Do you want to put that, Mr. Milliken, Chief Milliken?
I was just going to back up what Mr. McCurrick said. Been sitting on the auditor process. They clearly stood out ahead of everybody else that showed up, not only in their presentation but also in their written proposals. Everything they did was just very clear that they were well ahead of the rest of the proposals.
Judge Moore?
As a board member, I just want to thank the committee because when I read the notes, you guys asked great questions, and I feel comfortable in this process today.
I participated ex officio and clear choice, clear decision about the top firm, and it just took time to get to this point. So with that, I call for a motion.
A motion to continue on with our current auditors for this next 3-year period.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to clarify, under the statute, we should make a motion that for the board to engage Cherry Beckert under the terms of the, because the board is required to approve all the terms in the engagement letter too. So just for clarification for the record.
That's great. That
Okay.
just shows more of the same that I've been talking about. So.
Right.
Okay.
And a second?
So
Thank you,
moved.
Chief Milliken. All in favor?
Aye.
This motion carries. And will you notify them today?
We will.
Oh.
Thank you. And we'll get that letter for you to sign.
Yes, and I believe the request was that I sign it today.
Correct. Thank you.
We are on action item 3C, which is to adopt the FY22 regular board meeting schedule, and I'll turn that to Beth Houghton.
The listing of proposed board meetings for next fiscal year are in your packet at 3C. They are all in sort of the regular time, meaning the second Thursday of the month, but for the November meeting, but for the November meeting where the second Thursday would hit on Veterans Day. So we present this to you for your approval.
Second.
We have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye. This motion carries, and if I understand correctly, Sarah Winter will be sending JWB's meeting scheduler invitations to your calendar. So if you want to just be patient for a few days, they should be automatically fed into your calendar in the next week or so. So we are now on action item 3D, which is to approve new community council appointments. And I have a feeling some of you might be in the room today, so let's start with Millicent Battle to make the introductions.
Board Chair, fellow board members.
Would you put your microphone on, please?
There it
Thank
is.
you.
Board Chair, fellow board members, my name is Millicent Battle, Community Planner and South County Community Council Liaison. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Council Chair Corporal William Lawson. Corporal Lawson will present 2 new applicants to serve on South County Community Council.
Good morning, Board. It is my honor to introduce to some and present to others two of our phenomenal newest members. We have Ms. King, who is an executive director of the community-driven nonprofit organization called Pathways to Success Ministries Incorporated. This is dedicated to empowering and strengthening communities. She was raised right here in Pinellas County in the beautiful city of Clearwater. And Ms. King attended elementary and high school here and participated in various community programs throughout the city. Ms. King was brought up in a Christian household where she has some faith-based foundations, and emphasized education was very important and powerful in her household. After graduating from high school, Ms. King attended her bachelor's degree in criminal justice in University of South Florida. During her college career, Ms. King was granted invaluable experiences and knowledge, and accordingly wants to do more with the Tampa Bay youth and gain access to the same opportunities as she has. Her passion is feeding and clothing the homeless, assisting seniors and youth, and reducing crime. I introduce to you Mrs. King. Now, Mr. Washington. He is the founder and chief executive of the acronym CRUM, C-R-U-M, and that stands for Changing Lives, Restoring Communities, Uprising Education, Mental and Economic Development. It is a community outreach group where it primarily focuses on identifying the ongoing issues and that plagues our community. And he does this by implementing solutions, not just identifying those problems. Mr. Washington is also the mentoring team director of BEAST, a mentorship program that focuses on young males from the age of 8 to 18. The program transitions to a level of understanding needed to rehabilitate, create new habits, and counseling to help transition to a level of understanding. And this is done through career-guided interest and motivate them to continue identifying goals and moving forward in a positive way. Mr. Washington also hosts an annual I Got Your Back backpack school giveaway for the past 7 years. With the support of citizens in the St. Petersburg community, 5,000, yes, 5,000 backpacks filled with school supplies were provided to our scholars with tools needed for them to participate and excel in the lessons in and out of the classroom. Mr. Washington also is a beacon of hope to our homeless, our families, and in addition, he's also provided 2,300 meals to hungry souls. I'll introduce some, Mr. Washington. So you may ask, what have South County Community Council done so far during this pandemic? And I'm glad you asked me that question. I'll say that we unfortunately lost 2 members, but we've gained 2 phenomenal new members who will fill those shoes and excel and push us forward throughout our time there. We've also done some things with United Way, especially with the food supply. Monica Brim came in and informed us that a JWB-funded program has also provided food for the communities, not only within St. Petersburg, but the entire Pinellas County. And we're so grateful to JWB and all the things that you guys do here in this wonderful board. We thank you for this opportunity. It's good to see your amazing faces, so I know that you made it safely through the storm. And may God bless each one of you.
Before you leave, I just want to, on behalf of the board, welcome you and thank you for your service. I've attended in my tenure here the community councils, and I know the good work all of them do, but it's a dedicated group of people that are out there working on the behalf of the community. So thank you very, very much. Before we leave this item, I just wanted to bring everyone up to date that we have, upon today's approval, there will be 40 community council members, 10 North, 17 Mid, and 13 South County, just to give you an idea of how many people are out there working in the communities. So again, thank you very much.
And Mrs. Ralston, we do need to get a motion and a second to approve those two appointments.
Well, I knew that. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I needed you to check me on that. So do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Mr. McCurrick, and a second.
Second.
Mr. Butler, and all in favor?
Aye.
Now you're official. This motion carries. Okay, thank you. It's up to you to stay and enjoy the rest of the meeting or return to work. It's totally your choice. Let's move to action item 3E. And that's our CEO contract extension and annual performance. And you're probably saying, why is this on the agenda in July? One of the decisions that we need to make today and call for a vote is that this month gives us a 60-day notice. Beth Houghton, when she was hired, we hired her on a 2-year contract that expires, right now it's set to expire September 30th of this year. So this month gives us a 60-day window that if we were not going to extend Beth's contract, we would need to give Beth 60-day notice. I'm here on behalf of the board with my opinion that we would have consensus today to extend and renew Beth's contract for employment, and it will take some time to work through those details. But the vote that needs to be taken today is that we do fully intend to extend and renew Beth's contract beyond the 60-day notice. Do we have a motion for that?
I motion.
We have a motion wholeheartedly. Judge
Second
Moore?
wholeheartedly?
Second wholehearted. And do we have? Yeah. And all approval, please? Aye. Well, this motion wholeheartedly is approved. And I'd like to take a moment to discuss, we've had some conversations the last couple of days regarding the timing of, it's an awkward set of timing. And the first thing I want to say is that you would all agree that our fiscal year and all of our goals and intentions of what we hope to accomplish this fiscal year was derailed, not only in this organization, but in most organizations. So we were somewhat derailed because of COVID. And so on behalf of the board, what I would like to do is postpone until October the actual performance assessment for Ms. Houghton, the goal development for the 21-22 fiscal year, and we'll work with Ms. Houghton now to look at that contract, talk about extension, and possibly bring that right back to you in September. There is an opportunity that we could postpone that and do everything and take a vote today to extend the contract extension through the November 4th board meeting to give us some time to discuss all of that in combination to one another. So I'm going to put that out there for some, if there's any discussion, opinion, and comments.
Yeah, I'm all for extending that out to November. Just recalling from memory of the evaluation form that we use on the CEO, there's some items in there that certainly would be hard to register as far as evaluation because of COVID, what we've been through. And then there's some items that aren't even on that evaluation that we should be rating her on, that she did an excellent job of, that aren't on that evaluation necessarily. So it is kind of a weird year. It definitely changed how goals were handled and set and attained. So I'm all for moving that forward, or even moving that evaluation to the following year as far as that goes. Because we're really evaluating how we handled the disaster that happened with COVID. And that's something different than handling how we were able to manage our strategic plan and our goals and things that we were trying to attain. Because some of those things were derailed due to COVID.
Any other comments? I see Mr. McCurrick's up.
Yeah, I think Chief Milliken brings up a great point. I'm not sure how well we can evaluate based on what the evaluation criteria was because of COVID. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't, during that extended period of time, reconsider what we're going to evaluate on because of COVID? And then how do we reset the evaluation for going forward? Because as I think Chief Milliken said, there are some things you couldn't get to. There are other things that were actually addressed and addressed that we would never even thought of. And then there's the 100-pound gorilla or 1,000-pound gorilla standing in the corner where, and we had this conversation, where there was a request as being part of the evaluation that Beth fixed 2-on-1, which unfortunately she doesn't have the ability to do, and unfortunately our county commissioner's not here to hear this because it's really their responsibility, and it does need to be fixed. But so we have to, I think we need to look at the evaluation, maybe readjust it for the COVID issue, and then come back and look at, okay, what are we going to evaluate in the future based on the fact that hopefully COVID's behind us?
Okay, so with that, I am, okay, Ms. Flynn?
So legally speaking, there's a couple options the board could take. I
Right.
just want to put these out there and you guys can decide. Typically, the executive committee handles the evaluation process just for our new board members, which is the 3 board officers plus Chief Milliken. And we also typically hire Mary Grace Duffy from Cambridge Hill to conduct that process. And so the executive committee could work to revise the tool that you send out to all the board members to address the concerns that you both have raised. So that would be one issue for authorization today. The other issue is if you want to take the suggestion by Ms. Ralston that Chief Milliken seconded, you would legally make a motion to extend the contract through the November board meeting, which would give me authority to draft up a 2-sentence extension. Mrs. Ralston on the board, behalf of the board would sign it as well as the CEO. And then that would give you to November to do all these things. So those are the few issues that you should address with whatever motion you take.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I just guess the question is we almost need to do both.
Right, so
Right.
what I think from a point of view of our bylaws and our contract, the vote would specifically be to extend Beth Houghton's employment contract through November. It's board discretion on when we actually conduct the performance assessment and the goal setting. So I think the vote that needs to be taken is to extend the current employment contract through the November 4th board meeting with all intentions of getting that contract extension done by then. So do we have a motion for that? I see Mr., thank you,
And I'll
Mr.
second
Bartlett,
that.
and Chief Milliken, second. All in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye. So with that decision made, we're good through November for our employment contract, taking all of the pressure off of timeline, but I am going to recommend in mid-September, I've already had a conversation with Mary Grace Duffy, our consultant who has worked with us on years. She will begin to work with us on a timeline, and I would strongly recommend that we work on the performance evaluation and the goal setting during the month of October, beginning in September, so that it is prepared, all of it is prepared to come to the November 4th board meeting.
Agree.
Everybody okay with that? We don't need a vote. I just would like to see a nod of consensus. That would be handled primarily by the executive committee, Mary Grace Duffy, Beth Houghton, and we'll get it all done and back to you by November.
And I'd say, just for the benefit of the new board members, in that process, there's the opportunity for every board member to submit comments and evaluations for the executive committee to consider.
It's a full board participation, but Mary Grace will take the work, the technical work of bringing it home, and the executive committee will bring it back. We're good? All right, we can move to the presentation part of our agenda, which I'm sort of excited about. We are going to have presentation A, and a strategic plan update for the other of our newest focus areas, which is organizational capacity update. And Linda, I know you've been working hard this year, so let's hear about that work.
It's not just me. You're going to hear from a few of us today. Excuse me. So as Ms. Ralston just mentioned, in the strategic plan, we did incorporate an organizational capacity goal to capture the importance of a solid supporting infrastructure to the success of the plan. If If we do not have robust data and financial systems or a diverse and highly talented staff, we will struggle to achieve our goals. So today, my colleagues and I are going to give you a snapshot status of our work to date this year in this new strategic result area. And as there are a few of us tag teaming, we're going to let each person introduce themselves to keep it a little simpler to go through the various strategies. And I'm going to turn it over first to Deb Pruitt, who's going to talk about our advocacy strategy.
Thank you, Linda. Good morning. Is there a next slide? There we go. So I want to take you back to the March board meeting where you all approved the 2021 Legislative and Public Policy Consensus Forum platform and let you know what has been accomplished to date. Part of the construct of the consensus platform was to give Beth Houghton, as CEO, some latitude to sign on to initiatives that were going to benefit and impact our families, children and families in Pinellas County. So as of that March 11th meeting, pretty quickly the requests started coming in, and on March 28th, we were able to sign on to a support letter to extend the Medicaid postpartum coverage for pregnant women in Florida from 60 days to 12 months. And that is an extension, not an expansion. And that was an effort that was a bipartisan undertaking by not only the House and Senate, but also spearheaded by Representative Chris Sprouls, who is the Speaker of the House. That passed in House Bill 5201, which is a conforming bill to match up with federal law. It's also included in the General Appropriations Act. Subsequent to that, we were encouraged by the same entity, Florida Policy Institute, to assist them in encouraging Florida to accept $35 million from the Pandemic Emergency Assistance Fund that will assist families that are on TANF. It was part of the American Rescue Plan that was approved in March by Congress. Part of that encouragement included a recommendation that Florida consider making 2 payments of $415 each to the 39,000 families that are currently on TANF. That did not happen. We were advocating for that in May and June as school ended. We believe that the state wants to hold those dollars and allocate them closer to when school goes back, when families are looking for additional dollars for back to school and equipment and those types of things. Next slide. So the 2 areas that this consensus platform is structured in are in child nutrition and early childhood development, and that was the limitation of that authority that was extended to Beth to sign on. And within the child nutrition area is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program known as SNAP. And over the time of COVID, from the very beginning as the CARES Act and then the American Rescue Plan and 2 or 3 pieces of federal stimulus legislation in between, SNAP benefits and other nutrition benefits have been increased or enhanced or revamped, if you will. The increase in maximum benefits happened to families who were already receiving SNAP to get the maximum allocation in the category that they were receiving those benefits in. If you recall, one of my presentations to this board talked about the thrifty meal plan and how very limiting that allocation and that formula is. So this increased those maximum benefits. There's also an additional emergency $95 per month that are added to those benefits of current SNAP recipients. The summer 2021 that we're in now is allowing the pandemic EBT card that was issued in the early days of the pandemic when schools were closed to expand that and allow families with children over 5 years of age to receive $375 per month on a pandemic EBT card. If they aren't a SNAP recipient and currently have a SNAP card, it will be applied to that card if they do. And then for families with children under 5 years old, that $375 would be added to an existing SNAP card. What we're waiting for now is the child nutrition reauthorization, And that is happening in process in Washington in separate bills that will ultimately become the child nutrition reauthorization. What I believe is happening now is with all of these incremental increases, I believe they're waiting to see what the benefit of that is. There's also a report that's going to come from the U.S. Department of Agriculture on exactly what the enhancements to that thrifty meal plan formula are going to be, and that was as a result of language passed in the 2018 Farm Bill. In the area of childhood development, I have spoken to you before about bills that passed during this past session, the House Bill 3, the New World Reading Initiative, House Bill 419, the Early Learning and Early Grade Success bill. There have also been numerous allocations to the child care industry by way of the stimulus packages. The state of Florida is eligible for $2.5 billion of funding as part of the American Rescue Plan that will assist both the provider and families as it relates to co-pays and additional costs for child care. The Biden administration is currently looking to put forward a universal 3- and 4-year-old preschool program as part of the American Families Plan. We're still waiting for details on that to be released, but that's something that we're watching because that will impact JWB's 0 to 3 efforts moving forward. And then what families are waiting for here very soon, those who qualify will be the child care tax credit, and that's going to allow $250 per month for children under 6 years of age and $300 a month for children from 6 to 17 years of age, and that's going to be in an income range of up to $112,000 of annual income. Those checks will start coming out July 15th. They'll receive them monthly through December, and then in April, when they do their taxes, because this is how child tax credit had been allocated previous, they will receive that balance of what the maximum cap is as part of a tax refund. So they're getting incremental dollars into their household now and a lump sum as they file for their taxes. The Public Policy Unit will be working with communications to develop an outreach strategy to assist families who may not have filed taxes in the last 2 years or whose circumstances have changed to make sure that they are going to receive their funding either as a direct deposit to a checking account or as a paper check. Next slide. And then as part of knowing all of that, now we have to tell people about it. So we have JWB-led initiatives, obviously the 0 to 3 think tank, which is co-chaired by Beth Houghton and Lindsay Carson with the Early Learning Coalition. We have our Children's Mental Health Initiative with Linda Leedy and my colleague Becky Albert. Childhood Hunger Initiative, the Family Services Initiative Community Meeting, which we call the FSI group, as well as Grade Level Reading Initiative, and then JWB Community Councils who have not met as regularly. As soon as they bring those meetings back, I'll be able to attend those meetings and give them the updates. There are external organizations that I work with on a regular basis up until COVID, Amplify Clearwater, the Family Healthcare Foundation, St. Pete College Human Services Degree Advisory Committee, St. Pete College Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions, Tampa Bay Network to End Hunger, and Unite Pinellas. All of those are organizations that I interact with directly and am asked pretty regularly to give them an update. So that is how we disseminate that information.
Thank you, Deb. There were some pieces of information that were new to me, and so I appreciate the presentation.
Good morning, Board, and our Chief Executive Officer, Beth Houghton. I'm Joanne Rich, one of the community planners.
Good morning, Board members. My name is Jomar Lopez. I'm the Senior Strategic Researcher.
Thanks. You can move to the next slide. Thank you. So we've heard a lot about our staff already and the need for increasing staff and retaining staff and things move forward. And when you ask HR in the recruiting area, what do people think about our staff? What are things that jump up at you? A lot of people say they value high education. We have a lot of degreed people here, a lot of masters, a lot of people with doctorates. But actually, our staff is much more than that. We bring all of ourselves to work every day. We're single, we're married, we're divorced, we're widowed. Some are wealthy. Some are one check away from poverty. Some have experienced childhood abuse. Some have experienced domestic violence. Some had a supportive pastor, a coach, a mentor, a camp counselor. Some were that supportive person to a neighbor's child across the street. Some raised their children alone. Some raised them in multi-generational households. Some never had children. Some of our staff's families came to the United States centuries ago. Some just immigrated here recently. We speak many languages. We have different racial and ethnic backgrounds. We are gay, we are straight. We all have implicit biases. We are all imperfect, and we all want to do better. And we all believe in the mission of JWB. So when Beth and the leadership team put a call out to our staff saying we wanted to reprioritize our diversity, equity, inclusion task force, reform, regroup, restart, several staff volunteered from all levels of the organization to come together to look at what that would mean. We came as a group with Beth's leadership. We changed our name. We're now called the Equity Leadership Council. The group nominated 2 co-chairs and elected Jomar and I to serve together in shared leadership. We elected a communications representative. We created a charter and a mission, and you see that before you today. Our purpose of the council is to intimately understand and advance our organizational culture to develop the diverse workforce of today and tomorrow so that Linda and her team can be successful in both promotion, retention, and keeping us as strong as we can be for us as staff and the community that we serve. We established 2 subcommittees, and we've nominated subcommittee co-chairs.
Next slide. Thank you. So as the co-chairs for the Equity Leadership Council, Joanne and I have really made ourselves very available to JWB's executive team. At leadership's request, we presented to the staff at one of our town hall meetings. And we actually received a lot of positive feedback after that presentation. It demonstrated to us that we have a lot of buy-in from the staff on this committee's construction. As well, we are frequently on call with the communications team and with the executive leadership to promote the awareness months that occur all throughout the year. And indeed, one of our next steps is to update JWB's website in collaboration with the communications team so that we can put the message out there, JWB's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Next slide. Overall and as a whole, JWB to demonstrate its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion has been in consistent collaboration with Eric Smith from Inclusivity to develop trainings for the staff that promote, again, our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. One example is our unconscious bias training that we had recently. Furthermore, we've promoted various resources and trainings within our Equity Leadership Council and as well throughout the organization. One example of that is our Certificate of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion that was available through USF MUMA's College of Business. This was a 7-week evening course that the staff could do at their leisure. We do know that at least 7 of our staff members did participate and subsequently completed this training. It was very successful. So with that, Joanne.
And so we are going to share with you now a video that was made by our communications team highlighting Eric Smith. And like he says to us, every meeting when we gather each month with Eric and Beth, we start with a sharing session, just kind of keeping it real. And that's what we want to do. We bring all of ourselves to work, and Eric helps us keep it real. And so now please watch this video.
I had a phone call with Beth Houghton, and we started to just talk about, in general, diversity, equity, and inclusion and what that looks like. And what I recognized in that moment was Beth had a real desire to understand. She was looking at it from her own perspective, and how does this work? How do my own thought processes manifest into moving myself forward as an individual? And as a leader of a large organization that's very influential in a community, your personal perspectives always drive towards how the organization moves, because organizations tend to take the cues from leadership. So we continued to talk and realized that a coaching relationship would make some sense. So we created that. What that evolved into was a recommitment to this work, reassessing an organization based upon its original benchmark that inclusivity did a few years ago. So there's going to be a reboot or a restart with a new focus. The core piece of this that's absolutely essential in any one of these type of initiatives working, and its best practices, is that it has to be owned at the top. If the CEO does not own it, it doesn't work. The further down it goes in the proverbial pecking order of leadership, the less impact that it has. And Beth is owning it. The recommitment, the refocus, the belief system that this does drive business results, and most importantly, it reconnects you that much stronger to the community that you're serving. So with all of those pieces coming together, especially given everything that's happened over the last year, as well as what's currently happening in 2021, very recently, it speaks to the desire for folks to understand, how do we move now? How do we emerge stronger together? Understanding that we're in this together. What is the recommitments, the resurgence of the energy around diversity, equity, and inclusion? What does that mean? I've fielded phone calls directly and indirectly about, how does this work? How do we move forward? How can we be allies? We're excited about the ideas of doing some workshops. We're excited about the reassessment that we've done and what we've seen. We're excited about the reboot of the employee-led organization that's going to drive sustainability of this. And so thank you to JWB for the work that you're doing. And also to the staff and to the community. We're going to come out of this stronger together because we're in this together. Resiliency is the key.
Okay, good morning. I'm Laura Peel, Director of IT, and I am here to talk to you about 6.4, which is employing the necessary data systems to analyze information to drive decision-making, especially by the board. So, next slide. I'm going to just start with a little reminder of where we're at. Since 2013, we have been using GEMS, which is the Grants Evaluation Management System, and it included the participant management piece, where the agencies enter participants, and also the grants management piece, where we were able to pay our agencies. When we started looking in early 2020 for a new system, we did a lot of investigations and found that there was really not one system that would meet our needs. So we ended up doing 2 RFPs, one for grants management, one for participant management. And in September of 20, we selected Amplifund to be our grants management system. And just recently, back in March, we selected Apricot to be our participant management system. Next slide. So I'm going to give you just a little update of where we're at on each of those systems. So our grants management software, the main piece of it is the budgets, budget amendments, and reimbursements. That's how we collect budgets from our providers, and we're able to pay them. And we're happy to say that that went live in March of 2021. It was quite the effort, 6-month implementation, which was pretty quick. It required changes in procedures on both the JWB side and the provider side. But as of now, that is up and running. The provider contract development is the next piece, and that is in process. We're working with our providers for the fiscal year 22 contracts and building that capacity within Amplifund. And that should be complete very soon, and we're going to start generating contracts out. Procurements is a new piece for us, which I think fits into the conversation earlier, where we will hopefully be able to streamline the procurement processes. People will be able to apply online, we'll be able to do some evaluation, and we're in the process of working through the details on that. I believe the first RFP that will be used for that will be the capital coming up this fall. And then the last piece is the data warehouse integration, which really comes after we go live and we start getting the data. Next slide. So Apricot is the participant management system. This is, again, where our agencies enter all the participants that they serve, including their demographics, services, and outcomes. This is a heavy, heavy lift for our evaluation team. And we just signed this contract in March, but we are already steaming forward with this implementation, which will go live in the beginning of fiscal year 22. We've been meeting twice a week with the evaluators and the IT team and the staff from Apricot. And we're in the process of setting up all the screens for demographics, services, and outcomes. Later this summer, we'll train the provider staff. And again, in October, we're going to go live. The last step to that is the data integration as well. So next slide, please. I'm going to talk just a minute about that because the second part of 6.4 is to analyze the information to drive agency decisions. And this is where our data warehouse really comes to play. So we'll be collecting data from Apricot, Amplifund, and we also get some direct uploads from our providers. All of this information gets transported into our JWB warehouse where the data is crunched, it is cleaned, it is standardized, and then we're able to do analysis and reporting. And this is really where the heavy lift will come with our analytics staff. We were talking about, Linda was talking earlier about the evaluators who are learning new skills to assist with this, because all the packages that we have for GEMS now have to be rewritten to allow for these new databases. So it's quite the lift, but we are excited about it. We're looking at new technology and new ways to do this more efficiently. And so that's where we are at with 6.4.
I just wanted to make the comment that this process of going through essentially 2 RFPs for Amplifund and from Apricot, the procurement process and then the implementation process, each of which are heavy lifts, was not because it sounded like a really fun idea to Laura or any of her staff. Not too many months after I got here and Laura was making assessments of all of the systems that we use and being very transparent with me, said, the GEMS provider that we had used for both of these purposes, they want their check overnighted to them. That's a little worrisome when you are relying upon an organization to support key functions within your organization. And there were other clues that we just couldn't, as an organization, depend on them. And so, probably from that moment, we did a quick pivot and decided to put into effect these 2 procurements that had not been on anybody's schedule before. It sucks out a lot of time and doesn't really move forward the strategic plan, but prevents disaster that might have happened. We're well into that, but it has been a Herculean amount of work, not just for the IT people, but from folks across the entire organization.
And I'd like to comment, being on the other side of this table and being representing a funded agency, this is huge. if you are a funded agency by Juvenile Welfare Board, this is a huge impact on not only you and your team and all the little details that happen here, but it also requires a tremendous amount of effort, extra effort, I might add, on the part of the funded agencies and their needs of you. The phone's constantly ringing for something that's not working, that it's not smooth, and that it's not. And so I guess I'm curious to know, being that with Apricot particularly, you're in process, and yet that's a pretty aggressive, deadline of October. So how's it going with the funded agencies?
Well, we picked October because it's the end of, or beginning of our fiscal year, and it really makes sense as far as outcomes. We did have a member of our provider community on the RFP team and was part of the selection process. We have not really engaged the providers at this point. We're just beginning to, again, the setup. Over the testing period, we've suggested that we bring in some providers to do some testing, in particular the areas of attendance and those kind of things. Training's going to happen in August, September timeframe, and we're allowing people to finish up GEMS and have a period of time where they'll be able to ramp up here. We're also integrating the demographics information for any of the participants who are carrying over, so we're hoping that will help. But of course, with any system, there will be process changes. There will be procedure changes, training. People don't like new stuff. Change is not always, great for everybody. So we realize that and are taking it into account.
Keurig?
On the understanding the data warehousing is going to be the last, how much data from the previous system will be added to the warehouse, if you would call it? And then, how quickly, once the Apricot and Amplifier are up and fully running and we're getting information, how quickly would you be able to begin analyzing and reporting on that?
So we created our data warehouse about 5 years ago. Right. And we have, I don't know if any of you remember SAMUS, it was our previous system. We have all that in there. We have all GEMS data in there. We get it nightly today. So it's already in the system. We have not started receiving the Amplifund. That will be the next data set that comes in. We're supposed to get that within the next 30 days. And then over the summer, our analytics team will work to integrate that. Apricot data will come obviously after we go live, probably December and January, and then our staff will be working to integrate that. And we are planning on doing a matching process back to the GEMS data so that we can look at historically our participants. There won't be such a gap, of one system to another. We'll be able to look back at a person who crossed over both systems and see what their outcomes are and how they're doing.
Okay, I'm glad you brought it, because that's where my concern was, is how much of the past data could be actually used and then integrated with the new data coming in. And is it an apple comparison, or are you going to really have to massage it to get it to be there?
Yeah, it's definitely a heavy lift, just to redo, again, all the packages. We're not getting rid of any of the data, though. We're definitely keeping that. We just won't be receiving updates. But yes, recreating all of these packages, matching between two systems now, Amplifund and Apricot. Before we only had one, so even just matching program names, lots of detail there. But we have a pretty good plan and a great analytics team.
Good. All right, thank you.
Alrighty, this strategy is all about staff, recruitment, professional development, and performance evaluation. So, staff trainings, we do them every year, and you see on the right the column of trainings we do literally every year. We've been doing them for years. But in the year of COVID, we got to add a few more. As you can see, most of them were technology-based, so that we could operate in our remote environment. And our IT team, in addition to doing all this other stuff, was helping us learn how to use Teams and be effective and productive. How to sign documents. We implemented the DocuSign process, and we all know how to create an envelope and get a form around the organization remotely. So it's been very, we've been very busy learning throughout the year. Regarding mental wellness, we have opened the door for our staff to help them through this really difficult year. We had trainings on how to access our EAP program, how to understand the Family Medical Leave Act and whether the leave benefits apply to them. And our HR staff, provided a listening ear for individuals when they called in times of struggle throughout the year. And as Jomar and Joanne mentioned, we've been very busy with our diversity efforts and the unconscious bias training and the USF training that numerous staff participated in. And what I didn't list on the slide is also we did ACE training for our staff. As JWB staff members, we felt it really important that everybody get a basic understanding of the impact of trauma on childhood development. As you heard from Laura Brock, this year we did embark on a classification and compensation study. We do it every 3 years, and this was the year that we needed to bid out to find another solicitation to find the appropriate firm. We selected Evergreen Solutions. They are a national public sector consulting firm with expertise in HR, a full HR consulting practice. They operate in 47 states, but they're based in Tallahassee, and they've done over 500 of these. And this is their wheelhouse. This is what they do. So we started in May. We gave them all of our position profiles, our current pay matrix, our personnel policies, and anything else they asked for. And then they've done orientations with our executive team and all of our staff. And each staff member completed a survey delineating and defining the major tasks of their position, as well as the education required to be successful in that position. They are currently analyzing that data, and they are doing external outreach in comparison to other organizations like JWB and with like positions, because we really want to ensure external equity, so we're competitive to other employers in the marketplace, but we also want to ensure internal equity to make sure that our pay grades are consistent and fair between and across the pay grades. So we expect that they will be coming back to us early August with some recommendations that we anticipate bringing forward to you in September. And, a summary of last year couldn't end without a discussion of virtual. We did everything virtually. JWB really takes our performance evaluation process very seriously. It's really a professional development opportunity where the supervisor and the staff sit down and look at last year's goals, progress towards the goal, how much they accomplished, and then they set the goals for the next year. Well, this year we did it all electronically. We were able to submit all of our documentation through our payroll system, Paycor, and then we did schedule a one-on-one, a face-to-face Teams call to have that personal conversation. And we got them all done on time. Recruitment and hiring, we had to figure out how to do that online. Because you think about the HR recruitment and interview process, it's been historically a very in-person driven methodology. Well, we moved it online, got better with time, and we also added an ability to do increased skill set testing. In the past, we might give a writing test or an accounting skills test or try to figure out how well you can get around Excel. But we've identified a company that this is what they do. They've developed all kinds of assessments. So now we, for our top candidates, doing some tests for critical thinking skills, learning abilities, analytical skills, computer skills, and it's been very good, really very good for a reasonable price. So we're pleased with that, and it also indicates if you're going to hire this candidate where they have room for growth. We also instituted a buddy program. So once you recruit them and you get them here, they're at home and they don't get to meet anybody. So it's a little harder to get inculcated into the culture. So we've have staff volunteers who are seasoned JWB employees volunteer to pair up with our new employees, and they're generally not in their department, so it's not about their job specifically, but it's about what else goes on here, or how do I get a check request, or how do I do this, or who do I talk to about that, and all the basic things that folks kind of struggle through in their first 3 months in a new position. And the feedback we're getting on that is really great. In fact, Laura is a buddy, and she's got all kinds of good things to say about it. So I think that's, in the virtual world, I think it's a really good pivot, so to speak, to make people feel comfortable and part of the organization. And then finally, all conferences were virtual last year, and they were also mostly free. High-level professional development courses that, we used to have to pay money for and fly somewhere to take. Many staff took advantage of those free conferences and did them online, still continued with their CEUs or certifications, so we haven't missed a beat in that arena. And we are really, really good to go. So with that, I think that's a wrap on our organizational capacity goal. Everybody's still here, so if you have any questions for anybody, we'd be happy to answer them.
Comments, questions? Great presentation, great update. It's the part of the organization that we know happens, but we really got to learn more about it today, so thank you. We're on to our second and last presentation of today, which is kids count data. It's always interesting to have this presentation, but I'll even set the caveat out there that keep in mind it's always a lag in the data that we're going to view today. It's not something that can be last year's data, so stay current with us and turn it over to Barbara.
Ask you to do is to pull out the 2 sheets of kids count data which were left at your seats and have you review those with me. If you just look at first glance, you can see that the assessment is that we've done better on most of the indicators. There were just, from what I see, 2 that were the same, and this is comparing 2010 data to 2019 data. So this is a decade. This is a full 10-year decade of change. Just remember that all of these reports are lagged generally by a year. And the kids count data is originally pulled together in a big data book that is published by the Casey Foundation. And it's for the United States as a whole, and then they do analysis for each state. The core source is census data. So this is a comparison of the United States from roughly 2010 to 2019, and also data for the state of Florida, which compares the performance on those indicators from 2010 to 2019. Even if there was a 1% increase, it was considered better. So one of the questions that I have for you, and a couple of things that I would point out, I think the teen birth data is really a significant drop for the state of Florida. High school students not graduating on time, I think, is a significant improvement. Those stand out to me. But I would ask you, when you look at the raw percentages and you realize this represents a 10-year decade of activity, are you impressed with these statistics? Shannon, you want to start my slide, please? One of the things that I asked when I looked at this is what would happen and what might happen going forward if we had an alternative scenario. Go back to the first page, please. Where there was a target of simply a 1% improvement per year over the decade. So we say now, let's say just right now, when we project for the next decade forward, what we would like to see is at least a 1% improvement on each of these indicators each year, which would mean by the end of the decade, there would be a 10% improvement overall on each of the indicators. So you follow my thinking, my scenario here. All right. Let's take a look at what would need to happen to make that take place. So let's look at the economic domain. Right now, if we look at the state of Florida, our statistics for 2010 compared to 2019. So you have the 2010 actual, the 2019 actual. If we projected a 1% per year improvement, that third column indicates if we were successful, what that statistic would have been in 2019. So if we started with 23 in 2010, and we subtracted 10 from it, our target would be 13%. We would want to move from 23% to 13%. What we actually did was we moved from 23% to 20%, which is a 3% reduction. Do you follow the data? Okay. So, and again, those statistics in the third column represent a 1% per year improvement. The last column says what we would have had to have done in order to meet that 1% per year target. So if we were successful, rather than having an actual of 20, we would have had an actual of 13. And in order for that gap to be closed, we would have had to come down another 7%. For children whose parents lack secure employment, we would start with the actual of 34, taking away 10% over the decade, the target would be 24. We actually had 28 in the right direction, but there's still a 4% differential. All of this is just speculation and putting a framework forward of how we might have thought about how we wanted that data to go. We could do this for a 0.5% per year rather than 1% per year. And I did this for each of the domains, for the economic domain, education, health, family, and community. What you can see is that for children living in households with a high cost burden, we actually exceeded that 1% per year. In 2010, it was 49%. The 2019, the projection, if we had taken away 10%, would be 39, and we actually reached 37. So we exceeded that 10% reduction in the area of children living in households with a high cost burden. Could you go to the next slide, please? So if we look at another domain in education, again, similarly, if we had been able to achieve that 1% per year, where would we be? And that's that third column. And the differential between where we actually were in 2019, which is the second column, and where we would be with the 1% reduction, which is the third column, that differential is the last column. And you can see we would have had quite a bit to go to reach that 10% reduction. However, high school students not graduating on time, we actually got that from 29 down to 19. So we met that 10% reduction. We actually exceeded it because the actual was 14, which is even 5 less. All right. And then the next slide, please. In terms of health, here again, we have some work to do if we wanted to project a 1% per year improvement, and we can argue about the wisdom of whether that even makes sense. And then the last slide. This is family and community. Where we did exceedingly well was in teen births per 100,000. That was 32% in 2010, and we got it down to 17% in 2019. So that target was exceeded. But we have some work to do in the other areas. So my point in doing this was to say that although we look at the report and if there's a 1% change in the right direction or a 2% change in the right direction, it's described as being better. Do we accept that on the face of it, or do we say better really should be better than that? I guess that's the point that I'm making. Should better really be better than that? And then the argument is really, does a 1% per year projection make sense? Maybe that's too ambitious for some of these issues and some of these indicators. Maybe do a kind of projection for a 0.5% per year as an alternative. But what really needs to be discussed is whether it's a 0.5% or a 1% per year is how do we get there? What do we have to do at the state level to get there? And going forward, what I'd like to do is to include Pinellas County data as a third indicator so we can see how Pinellas County is doing compared to Florida overall. I have a few small data points of comparison that came out of the data we produced for our Children's Summit a couple of years ago. And let me just share those with you. These are not on the slides, but for children in poverty, it was the same for Pinellas County as for Florida, which was around 19%. Where we did much better, again, for the high school graduation rate, the state was 14, Pinellas County was 11, so we did better there. And the one that really stands out is for teen births. We did much better than the 17% for teen births. And for children living in single-parent households, this was significant. The state was 39, Pinellas County was 21. So we did very good there. And with children without health insurance, we were 1% less as a county compared to Florida overall. So I think when we look at the kids count data, there's the sort of on the surface interpretation of it. And there's the what if we pushed ourselves a little bit harder interpretation of it in terms of what those statistics might look like. So let me just open it up for questions, comments.
Barbara?
Yes.
I guess my real question, I mean, I understand where the data or how we go. We start here and we work our way down into Pinellas. Once we get to Pinellas where you're able to do all this, which I'd be probably close to doing it now, how do we get it down to what we at the JWB clearly impact? What's our percentage of that percentage, or that we can actually today impact? And then the question is, based on the programs that we now have in the strategic plan, how do we increase that impact space? And I always go back to the we only impact 11% in the reading because the school system's impacting more of that. What is it really, for the funds that we're spending, and then we're spending on the taxpayer dollars, what are we really impacting? How are we able to make significant changes with those funds or additional funds that'll be brought to it? And what can we really say? Is it, can we target to do the 1%? Can we target to do 0.25%? I don't know what that number is, and hopefully you'll be able to guide us in that direction.
I'm not sure what that number is either, but what I would say is there are at least 3 questions embedded in what you just said, so let me untangle them.
Okay.
The first is, what contribution can JWB make to metrics like this for Pinellas County? And as you rightly know, our direct impact is a relatively small percentage of all of the programs and the children in Pinellas County. So we contribute to that along with every other human service organization in Pinellas County and the Pinellas County school system and everybody else who's trying to change those metrics. By definition, our direct impact on those is going to be proportionate to the number of people that we touch, which is relatively small. So that's one. The other question, though, is would we want to try to track some of these data points directly for people that we serve in our programs, if we can get the data? That's a more, so for example, if we looked in some of the educational metrics and we wanted to know how many children in the 3rd grade were on point in terms of math, we could actually do that for the children that we serve in JWB's education program. There are going to be some of these metrics that we don't measure directly and would be very difficult for us to measure directly. But there are others where we actually could get JWB level data. And what we may find is that Pinellas County may be doing a little bit better than the state of Florida, and JWB may be doing a little bit better for its direct service recipients compared to the rest of Pinellas County. So we could stretch out that analysis and have some specific data for JWB funded programs. And I would be talking to Laura and our data team about what we can actually generate from the statistics that we have on our programs directly. But I am always a little nervous when we have the conversation about how JWB spins the needle for Pinellas County, because our touch is relatively small. We're in a stronger position to say if we could carve out that metric for the people that we directly serve in our education programs, in our 0 to 3 programs, how do our program participants look relative to some of these metrics? And then the third question would be, does JWB want to set some targets as we move forward? So if we do X, let's say, for example, with our 5-year strategic plan, that would be a very interesting opportunity to say, here we are at baseline in year 1 of our strategic plan. What would we like those data points to look like for our program participants at the end of that 5-year period? Then we could start to align what we're doing as strategic implementation strategies as to whether or not we're seeing effects on these metrics in addition to the other data that we collect in our evaluations.
What you just described, I think, is extremely important because it takes us right back to the beginning of the conversation that we were having as to the funding that we're getting from the taxpayers. How are we using that properly enough to really make a major impact? First, we have to understand what are we really impacting.
Right.
How can we either potentially expand that? But then how do we ensure, or how do we prove to ourselves and the taxpayers that the funds that we're spending are in critical need and that we're making an impact?
Right.
Because we're going to be reviewing this again, as you know, in 2030, in next year, 2023.
Yeah, we should be looking at this annually for sure.
Right. We're going to be saying, do we lower the rate? Do we spend more money? Do we reduce the amount? Do we come to a flat and say, okay, this is the best we're going to ever do and let's just stay there? Those are the questions that we're going to need to be asking to decide whether or not the rates are going to stay the same, they're going to go down or wherever. But it's really got to be based on what is the real impact that we're making on the community with the funds that we have.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would absolutely love to be able to see that type of analysis made, and for us to go out, almost call it on a limb, to say this is what we need to have and this is what we need to accomplish with the funds that we're putting out to do this.
Yeah, and we have 2 data sets. We have some of these kids count indicators, but don't forget we have measurable outcomes for each of our program areas that the evaluators collect. So we've got several different data points that we can use to assess this over time. But I think it would be an interesting exercise for us to maybe just have, even as a conceptual discussion about, if this is where our clients are now, where would we like to see them be at the end of the 5 years? and some kind of reasonable projection.
And the question is if we then go back and look at the domains that you've laid out, are they the domains that we should be really focusing in on?
Yeah. Some,
Right?
I would say some yes and some no.
No.
Right,
And
exactly. Some yes and some
then we need
no.
to hone our thinking and our view into those that we really can make an impact on. And that takes us right back to where we started from years ago, when we started to say we wanted to measure success. We want to see what we're spending and the value that it brings, and then make adjustments based on that. And I think this is a prime time, I believe, to
Right.
do just that. So I would
It
really
is.
welcome to see the
Right,
types of
and
things that
in
you
the
can bring us there.
strategic planning process, I mean, as you know, we've been talking a lot about the process measures, activities and things that get accomplished. But the other part of the strategic plan are the outcomes. You can do all the work elegantly. Everything is done on time. If you're not achieving the outcomes, you've had a successful process, but you've not had a successful set of outcomes. And so the other part of that equation is for us to consistently measure the outcomes over time to see if all that work we've outlined in the strategic plan with such care and such elegance is actually producing the outcomes that we want. All of these will not be applicable. But remember, the purpose of these data points, the kids count, is to give a snapshot of the United States and the states broadly. They are not fine-tuned to the kinds of outcomes that we necessarily have for our program. So although we can look at these would almost be secondary in my mind to the ones that we need to look at, which are much more closely tailored to the outcomes that are articulated in our contracts for our programs and that our evaluators assess on a regular basis. And those we need to be looking at annually and trending annually, and we will.
As we begin to wrap up this presentation, I guess it's a reminder of the work, not only of Beth, but hiring Barbara. It gives us a view of the immediate future with your skill set helping us to drill deeper to the data analysis of our work. And that's something that we've wanted for a long time, and that's built in to this year's strategic plan and to Beth's hiring. I think we go back to the search committee and all those countless meetings we had discussing what we wanted for the future of Juvenile Welfare Board. And I think you've honed that today and get us hopeful about the future. Mr. Bartlett?
I just wanted to comment on what Mr. McCurrick said and Ms. Rodriguez were talking about, and I think it's a great idea. And I think it's what the part I like so much is where you do have a national, a state, a Pinellas County, and then we can have a JWB comparison. And you can look at it and see it, and you say we're doing better. If not, we need to work on this area. But I think that gives us a validity to the whole process by doing that. And whatever we need to do to move in that direction, I think is a great idea.
Right. And I think wherever JWB particularly exceeds the Pinellas County data, that's a strong indication that our programs are moving in the right direction, because we're kind of comparing apples and apples to geography, the population, the environment, and so on.
And it would also help us influence the change required in the Pinellas County to make it, to bring them along with us. I mean, we were the first to get started here. You know, we were the first across the state to be there. We need to continue to lead in that space as we go forward, and we've got to show everyone else that, you know, the things that we're doing are most impactful, and that they should be widely used or spread across to help impact others.
Right.
You know, my real concern continues to go back is that we're like this big and everybody else is here, and you know, we've got to show everyone that what we're spending the taxpayer dollars for is really making an impact to and for our community, and that everyone else should join with us to do the same.
Right.
And stop being, in some places, I'm not saying they are, but in some places they're complacent. In other places they're trying, and maybe the programs they've got into place aren't working, or some of them may be really working. I'm not saying that, you know, nothing else is happening, but we've got to converge into a solution that is progressively moving forward in impacting these requirements, because these are the kids, these are the people who are going to be here when we're long gone. And if we don't make some changes and don't impact that now, what's it gonna look like, in the future? I
Right.
don't wanna see that happen.
Yeah, and I think 1 or 2 percentages for 10 years is not a stellar performance. I think we've got to do better than that.
One of the comments I'd make is that if we take kids count data as it is from US to Florida to Pinellas and then our programs, one of the things I think we'll miss is that those first 3 categories I talked about are everybody, all kids. And we're very intentional at the JWB in focusing our programs by location and by program design and everything else for those kids in the greatest need.
Right.
So a real comparison of did we make a difference would be to compare those kids with like other circumstances, like economic situations, poverty, single-parent households, those kinds of things. And with similar households, did we make a difference for those kids?
Well, we could actually probably do that, Beth, in cooperation with the Florida Kids Count Center. Because I know Noreen Dollard over there, they have the capacity, for example, to stratify some of that data further by socioeconomic status. Maybe we can even do it by zip codes so we can match the areas where we serve. I think there are all kinds of ways to slice and dice that, and we have the data capacity in-house to do that. So it is a way of controlling for some of those variables, where if they're allowed to vary too much, we're comparing apples and oranges rather than apples and apples, and we can manage that.
Have the data capacity to do this.
Yes,
so
we
there's no
do.
pressure at
That's
all.
why I was so glad to hear Laura do her presentation first. I'm saying I got some confidence that we have the analytic capacity to get there. And wherever we have those kind of qualifiers, we'll always note when that might be an issue.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very important presentation today as we begin to wind down this fiscal year. Beth, you're up for our CEO update.
Okay, I want to mention a few things. First is that we are now on the 3rd program within our county to assist families and others to avoid eviction. And the current program is running through one of the departments of the county, has really just been stood up over the last few months, and while I don't have a current number, they have had significant backlogs, which you would expect with any program being stood up from scratch. We have offered and tried to figure out how we could assist those families who are applying, because once again, it's a program where you don't go to an office and provide your data and somebody helps you. It's all online, so scanned, emailed, that sort of thing. I think we're close to a data sharing agreement with the county so that our navigators, when I say our navigators, I'm really talking about people from PEMS and Gulf Coast that we pay for them to be able to work with a family and look up what the data system's showing. You've got 8 out of 10 elements there, but you need these last 2. And then helping the family get those documents, which is not easy for everybody, and get them in, and then a week or 2 later, or whatever the appropriate time frame is, to check on the status. We found sometimes the file was complete, but it didn't ring bells with anybody to say done. You can send them the check. So as with all of these programs, we've tried to find ways that our folks could pivot and be of assistance. We don't have to own it, but we want to help. The second thing, you've heard us talk month after month really about the success our JWB staff have had in working virtually. And I would want to say with Laura here, Laura's always here because she's got to man the desk here, but that the entire IT group has made that possible. Every document I could get sitting in my office, I could get sitting in my home. And so it has really been an amazing effort. We, I think I'd mentioned to you at the last meeting, we surveyed all of our employees. We did follow-up focus groups with our employees to sort of suss out the nuances and the subtleties of what they had to say. And while if we followed that sort of slavishly, we would just keep working on a virtual environment almost entirely. I would say I have some nervousness about that. My husband calls this the grand social experiment. In a year and a half, we're all going to know how well this worked. And the key question about having everybody work virtually, or about more people working virtually more of the time, is, do we lose something in personal relationships and growth? Do we learn? Do we lose something in building the culture and who we are? So the sort of compromise we're leaning towards, we'd already said through September 1st we were going to continue to work virtually, but for public meetings like this one. And that gave all of our folks, many of whom have kids, the ability to plan for the summer for their kids. But once the school system starts, the sort of the tentative planning is that unit meetings and department meetings would in fact be held here on premises. They're being held by Zoom meetings or Teams meeting now, so it's everybody seeing each other's face, but those are opportunities for people to come in, see each other, have the before the meeting and the after the meeting meetings that we all know, oh, can I grab you just for a minute? Oh, can I grab you just for a minute? And have some of that personal interaction. The expectation would be, if you come in for your department meeting, that you stay here for the day. So it creates some opportunity for people to be in the office full time for a day here and a day there. It is true currently, and would continue to be true, that if any employee wants to work here in the office all the time or more of the time, that is absolutely available to them. So if their home working environment is not supportive, or there are too many people or whatever, that is always an opportunity that they have. So we're, in the next month or so, Linda and Sabi will put together the policies that will support that. One of the reasons we will not have a full staff meeting is this is the biggest room we have, and the thought would be that we would have this room available for 10-person meetings or maybe 15-person meetings where everyone can still socially distance. But all staff meetings will still be held on a virtual basis. And as will everybody else, we'll just watch what's happening. I'm not going to pretend to know what the D variant is going to do and what we're going to face through this summer in Florida while we're all inside because it's air conditioned and so on. I have the privilege to give a really hefty award to somebody. Let me just feel it. You heard Brian Onks made the announcement in February, at the February Finance Committee meeting, that JWB had been recognized by the Government Finance Officers Association, otherwise known as GFOA, with a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for our 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, otherwise internally known as CAFR. Don't y'all need more acronyms? The GFOA award is considered the gold standard of financial awards and demonstrates excellence in financial accounting and reporting. And Juvenile Welfare Board was one of the few organizations who received this on their first try. Juvenile Welfare Board's accounting team, led by Lynn DeLatour, is to be commended. They gathered 10 years. The first time's the hardest because you've got to go back and capture 10 years of statistical data. That's part of the CAFR. you add, if you go forward one year, you add one and you drop off one. But that first year was tough. She did so in the midst of a transition with the CFO and still managed to do it. So we now have the plaque, and I'd like to come over and present that to Lynn. Probably feels as heavy as some of the files that you have to work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Find a good.
Yes, thank you.
And we have awards all around. For the fourth year in a row, the Juvenile Welfare Board Communications Team was awarded the prestigious Telly Award. This year, it's a silver award. We haven't received the physical one, but I think you see them. Are they out in the main? You'll see them as you walk out from prior years, so this is not a first. For our fiscal year 20 annual report video titled A Year of Resiliency. I think you would have seen that both at our annual meeting as well as, I'm pretty sure we presented it here as well. You see the wonderful team of folks who had either a lot or a little to do with this. The Telly Awards celebrate the best work in video and television, and each year we compete against 12,000 plus entries from 50 states and 5 continents. In spite of having to produce the video in a virtual environment, we were able to successfully showcase JWB's work and impact during the global pandemic, and many JWB staff were featured in the video, making this really an award for the entire organization. A special thanks, all of these folks are important. A special thanks goes out to Gail Kellen Christensen, right in the middle there, with a silver Telly right there, who served as the producer, the director, and the editor for the video, and certainly to the entire team for all of their contributions. I'm gonna squeeze in. Well, no, I'll wait till we get there. Never mind. It is fun beginning to talk about real events. The JWB 75th anniversary and Kids First Awards luncheon will be held November 12th from 11:30 to 1:30 at a real place at the St. Pete Coliseum. And for those of you who know that venue, you know it is really big, and it can accommodate over 900 people, and we typically have 500 to 525, so we will be able to spread people out safely. We'll once again invite current and former JWB board members to serve as honorary hosts, and we will contact the Dillinger and the McCabe families with a personal invitation given our plans to unveil the Dillinger-McCabe Putting Children First Leadership Award at the event. So save the date, invitation will be coming soon, and you'll be finding out about that. Friday, July 30th from 9 to 12 is the annual diversity conference, Embracing Our Changing Community. We are one of many sponsors of this virtual conference alongside the Hispanic Outreach Center, St. Pete College, City of Clearwater, Empath Health, and others. And the link to register can be found in your board packet under Calendar of Events or on our JWB's website. And then the Out of School Conference, or OST, Conference 2021. Our title is Refocus, Reignite, Reimagine. So on Friday, September 17th from 9:30 to 1:30, we will have a virtual watch party style conference. So folks gathering in smaller groups in person to watch. And we anticipate about 400 out of school time staff in attendance. And I hear, although I don't know the name, that we have a dynamic keynote speaker and very relevant trainings planned. And these really end up being highlights for the staff that the toil in the vineyard, as it were. So that's all I have for my report.
The information items are always included on the agenda for your review. I'm assuming I haven't heard anybody want to pull any of those items. If not, I look to Ms. Flynn.
Susan, I might want to comment on a few of them.
Okay.
These are sometimes the less fun, but I would want you all to know that the staff takes each one of these seriously. I guess it is 6C, we had the program and financial monitoring information. And first we list those organizations that are under some kind of CAP or PIP, some performance improvement plan or a corrective action plan. And then you will see monitoring reports for a number of our organizations. We do not complete those at one time of the year, so you get them across months. But I would want to point out, just so you know, because each of these are really time-consuming efforts, and yet they reflect what this board has told us they want to do. So 211 Tampa Bay Cares had never been under the same kind of monitoring that we monitored other organizations. It was just a separate contract, and we began last November a corrective action plan. It is the criteria that we were looking for have still not been met. It is extended to September 3rd. And primarily we're looking at things like, as a process, we're looking at turnover, because we know if you're not fully staffed and you have high turnover, you're not going to be able to do the job that you need to do. So we watch that. But in terms of outcomes, as it were, we're looking at the number of calls that were abandoned because people just didn't want to wait, average speed of answer, how long did people have to wait, and then the number of calls that 211 has had to take. So we added some individuals at 211 last December, January, in anticipation that when the COVID CARES money went away for eviction, that we might see a lot more calls, particularly to FSI, which is our part of that. That really didn't occur because another program came in its place. But we're still not seeing the kind of responsiveness we would want to see. This is a program that, or this is an organization that is funded primarily by the county and secondarily by the Juvenile Welfare Board. But our investment is over $1 million, so it's no small thing. And it's one we continue, frankly, to struggle with, but we're working as closely as we can with the county. It's an integrated operation, so we can't go do something over here that makes much sense unless we do whatever we do with the county. The second is Hope Villages of America, formerly Religious Community Services, and you would remember that they have been on a cap for a significantly long time. The cap related to two different kinds of activities, buckets, if you will. One were across the entire agency. The other related to one of the two programs that we funded. So we finally came to a point where we terminated the contract for Grace House, the one program we were funding, but we continued to have oversight, particularly financial oversight. The form of billings that came to us and the professionalism we saw still wasn't there. We're glad to say that has improved significantly, and to the point that cap was completed. They are no longer on a cap as of June 14th. So you won't see them on this list again. The YMCA of Greater St. Petersburg, their Lealman YMCA preschool program, I think you've heard it here before, but I can't say sort of emphatically enough, all early learning programs are struggling mightily with staffing. The work that Barbara has done in the 0 to 3 think tank, no matter what group it was, subgroup that was looking at what issue, staffing rose up as a huge issue. And staffing is the fundamental issue that the YMCA is struggling with. But we have particular concerns about continued licensure problems with Class 2, some Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 violations with the licensing board. We think maybe it's getting better, but then it's not. And so their cap has extended to September 30th, 2021, and we anticipate having another conversation with their leadership to see, are there ways we can be helpful? What is uniquely going on there? Like I said, the staffing problem is everywhere, but there seems to be particularly acute. So I'll leave it at that.
And before we leave that topic, particularly for our newer board members, it has been the general practice and advice of this board to our CEO is when an agency is on a corrective action plan, that the board leadership is informed, just to let them know that Juvenile Welfare Board, one of their funders, is concerned enough to put them on a plan, and it's in everyone's best effort to make sure that the board leadership is informed. And I just, that hasn't changed for any agency on a cap. Mr. Butler?
Yeah, I just want to thank Beth for that, because after reading through it, you have a plan of action for the organization, but also you have 5 people that sign off on each one. So I know there's people watching this thing, and there's a lot of work put in this. I really, pretty impressed. I know there's been a few board members that are no longer here who's been asking for this, and I wish you had the ability to see this, because it's really very, very good. Thank you again.
Okay, Ms. Flynn, do we have any requests for public comment? Okay, then we can begin adjournment with the last item is for Mr. Butler to, please let us know about our anniversaries for the month of June.
I will do so. In June, Lynn De La Torre, 18 years.
Yes, congratulations.
Wow. Sabi Giccicelli,
Yes,
15 years.
yes,
I'm trying my best with this. Megan Seals, 10 years.
yes.
And Nicholas Benedetto, 5 years.
Congratulations.
Hope he's related to the NASCAR driver.
Yeah, congratulations. Just a note of recall that we're not hosting an August board meeting, and that the September board meetings have changed in date. September 8th is the board meeting, followed by trim hearing, and then again, September 22nd, the second trim hearing. So just make sure to stay attuned to that. And seeing no other lights or comments, we'll adjourn today's meeting. Have a great day, everyone.